Hi everyone and welcome to Bonnie Astrology. Today I'm going to be discussing the astrology of and the horoscopes for March 2025, which is an extraordinary month in astrology world. We have Venus and Mercury both going retrograde in the signs of Aries and Pisces, and we have eclipse season. We have a total lunar eclipse in Virgo, which is bringing back the eclipses in the signs of Pisces and Virgo, which began back in September 2024. And we also have a solar eclipse in Aries, which is going to be closing out the series of eclipses in Aries and Libra, which began back in 2023. And as well as that, for the first time in all of our lifetimes, Neptune is entering Aries. This is going to be uncharted territory for all of us. So if you want to know what it means for your zodiac sign, the timestamps are listed below. If you want to know what it means for all of us collectively, just keep watching. As always, if you do enjoy this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up to let me know that you like it. Subscribe to the channel for regular astrology content from me. And if you want to book a reading with me or follow me on my Instagram, all the links are listed in the description. But let's begin with Venus retrograde, because in the first of the month, Venus goes retrograde in the sign of Aries. Now, Venus retrograde is about relationships. It's also to do with our values, what is important to us, what is meaningful to us, and it is to do with our finances. So Venus retrograde is an opportunity, particularly in March as Venus is retrograde all month, to reevaluate these different topics. You might be reevaluating different kinds of relationships in your life, if they're equal, if they're balanced. You may be reevaluating what is important to you in relationships. I remember a dance instructor saying to me when I was younger that the types of relationships you choose in your teens and your 20s and your 30s are not the same. And that doesn't mean that you can't meet people in your teens and grow together and, be friends for life or be, married for life, whatever the case may be. Doesn't mean that's not possible, but it does mean that you change and shift and your priorities change and shift. And sometimes they align with the person that you're connecting to or you're in a relationship of whatever kind with, and sometimes they don't. But Venus retrograde helps us reevaluate what is important to us, what is meaningful for us in our connections. But also when it comes to our finances, how we spend money, what we spend money on, that tends to change from decade to decade as well, for the most part. With Venus retrograde, it tends to be that we reevaluate these different types of areas. It's not there to ruin your life. It's not there to make everything difficult. Venus retrograde is a time of reflection, review, and reevaluation when it comes to our relationships. And in the first sign of the zodiac and the final sign of the zodiac, this can be to do with new beginnings, initiations, pioneering energy, our relationship to ourselves with Aries, but also with it happening in the sign of Pisces, our relationship to our past selves, what's in our subconscious, what we need to heal, what we need to forgive, where we need closure in order to move forward. This Venus retrograde is interesting because although, it begins in Aries, it does shift back into Pisces. And when it shifts back into Pisces, it's going to connect with Saturn, the North Node, and Neptune, which means that when we're reevaluating our relationships or our finances or what matters to us or what we consider, beautiful or attractive in our lives, whether they be aesthetically or in terms of qualities, with Saturn, there's a testing of boundaries, and there's also a karmic element to this. So karmic relationships, commitments in relationships as well can be tested and reflected upon or reevaluated even, especially if you have Venus in Aries or Pisces. And it can be with Neptune that we realize whether something is too much of a fantasy or an illusion or a delusion, and with Saturn, whether it can actually be grounded in reality or committed to. There's a very sobering element there's a very sobering element with Saturn, and there's a very not so sober element of Neptune. So it's really testing the fantasy versus the reality. And all of this is to push us towards the North Node, where we're going, where we need to grow when it comes to relationships, when it comes to our values, when it comes to our connections, and also when it comes to our finances. So this Venus retrograde is very important. It's very karmic because of its connection to the nodes, especially because it's falling in eclipse season. Now, eclipse season this year is very interesting because we do have a total lunar eclipse in Virgo, and we haven't had an eclipse in Virgo since the 2016 eclipses. And this may be a time with this total lunar eclipse that there is an absolute change in your Virgo house. There's something has to change, something has to be reconsidered, particularly as this eclipse is ruled by Mercury, and the very next day Mercury goes retrograde in Aries. So we're really reevaluating this sector. And it's interesting because a total lunar eclipse in Virgo, for us collectively, it's going to bring a lot of focus onto health, how we take care of ourselves, how we look after ourselves, also healthcare systems. It's also to do with the work and the services that we provide, you know, the service industry, the roles that we play, the way we connect with coworkers. With this eclipse, a lot of people may be deciding to change jobs if they're unfulfilling. And if you feel like you're not being valued with the Venus retrograde and the Mercury retrograde in Aries. It can also be that a lot of people are changing their health and their well-being for the sake of their physical body, with the ruler of this eclipse being Mercury in Aries. Now this is an interesting one because one thing I've observed with the South Node going into Virgo since January is a lot of people changing their diets. I have seen 2 people who were lifelong vegetarians suddenly go back to eating, maybe not lifelong vegetarians when I think about it. People who were vegetarians for a very long time suddenly eating fish or eating meat. You know, there seems to be a shift with people's diets. And then there's obviously people that will go the opposite way where they're suddenly going vegan or going vegetarian, you know, changing the way that they eat. But I have noticed with the South Node, it being a point of releasing a lot of people that were, you know, very plant-based, suddenly changing. And you might notice that around the time of the eclipse, a lot of people changing what they regard to be their health habits, how they look after themselves and their routines. As I say, a lot of people could change jobs around this time. This eclipse is in an opposition to Saturn in Pisces, and I think with this eclipse it can also bring up conversations about routines and wellness when it comes to our physical health, how we take care of ourselves on a practical level, versus how we take care of ourselves spiritually and from a mental health perspective as well. This eclipse with Saturn being in opposition to it is certainly a time where commitments are tested. And we may notice around this time with commitments being tested, values being tested, and the foundations being tested. There can, of course, with eclipses sometimes be a little bit of a tower moment where something is not built on a solid foundation and you may have to rebuild or you may have to forgo it altogether. Total lunar eclipses do tend to bring about some degree of closure or release with this one in particular, but it does seem to be very health and work focused with it happening in the sign of Virgo. It is in a lovely trine to Uranus, so there can be innovative ways to make positive changes with what's coming up at the time of this eclipse, and there can also be some positive surprises in the mix as well. The solar eclipse that's coming up in Aries is happening on the 29th of March, and this one's particularly interesting because the very next day Neptune enters Aries. Now Neptune is a very spiritual planet. It is to do with our spiritual side, our fantasy, and when Neptune was in Pisces, Neptune was very at home in Pisces. It corresponded with a mass spiritual awakening or more spiritual interest. Things like tarot cards became more commonplace. You can see spell candles in certain grocery stores. You can see tarot cards in shops where they weren't before. More people are interested in the spiritual side of life, and we see that really developing with the North Node going into Pisces. Neptune entering Aries is a really interesting one because it can bring our focus to, with Aries, spiritual warfare. It's an interesting one because Aries is a very, you know, it's a sign of war, it's a sign of conflict, it's also a sign of pioneering and being bold and taking risks and being a warrior. Neptune is a very spiritual planet, so people might notice around this time that there could be a little bit more focus on conflict when it comes to religion, when it comes to spiritual beliefs. I think that's something that we're sort of noticing more and more. That's always been something that's happened, be honest, in, you know, our lifetimes, but Neptune really brings a focus to it. It can also be a focus on, you know, our relationship to ourselves with Aries, a more spiritual relationship with the self, a more spiritual relationship with the soul, more connection to our personal interest in the divine, our connection to the divine on a personal and independent level as well, whereas Pisces is very much the collective. Now this is a short-term thing because Neptune is going to retrograde back into Pisces, but Neptune in Aries is going to feel really quite unfamiliar. And it's interesting too because, as I said, it's happening the day after a solar eclipse in Aries, so there's a new beginning in the Aries side of our chart, but it is that little bit less totally self-focused because it does now contain Neptune there. And Neptune can oftentimes be a time that we really connect with the divine, particularly in the Aries part of our chart. So you may notice a significant change in your Aries house. We'll talk about that in the horoscopes. But with that solar eclipse being in Aries, it can bring a new beginning for a lot of us when it comes to initiations, when it comes to taking bold action, to being a pioneer, to beginning something new. It's very fresh. It is a part of the series of eclipses that have been going on in Libra and Aries since 2023. It's the final eclipse in that set of signs for quite a while. So you may be having a new beginning in your Aries house. On a world focus, this is, of course, to do with conflict. I hate to say it, but it's a solar eclipse in Aries, so there can be a new beginning when it comes to some sort of, current conflict. It is ruled by Mars, and Mars is in Cancer, so it feels very territorial. It feels to do with home matters. It feels like it's to do with, people's living arrangements. It's quite a patriotic energy as well, so people asserting their patriotism, and it may be resulting in a little bit of conflict, but it doesn't have to result in conflict. It can be the way that we navigate it and negotiate it with the solar eclipse being in Aries. At the time of that eclipse, there is a Venus-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, which can bring a sense of healing and a sense of surrender as well. So that could be a really interesting eclipse to look at. But it does look like an initiation, a new beginning in the Aries parts of our chart. Quite karmic, quite destined with the eclipses as well. Mercury is going retrograde in Aries on the 15th, the day after the lunar eclipse. So we are experiencing really this month a lot of focus on the Aries and Pisces part of our charts, as well as the Virgo parts of our charts. A lot of new beginnings, a lot of reevaluation. And I know that it doesn't sound like there could be new beginnings when there's so many retrogrades, but two things can coexist at once. There can be new beginnings somewhat rooted in the past or due to reflection. There can be things that begin that we may have to go over again later. We might have to make a few changes, but there is change happening in the Pisces and Aries parts of our charts, as well as the Virgo part of our chart with that total lunar eclipse activating the South Node in Virgo story for all of us. But it does seem to be very linked to healthcare and how we take care of our physical bodies and how we take care of the self. That solar eclipse in Aries on the 29th does seem to be a little bit more focused on asserting oneself for the sake of one's family or the sake of one's home, initiating something new for the sake of security, even for us all individually, but as well collectively with the solar eclipse in Aries. Really wrapping up that storyline of eclipses, but of course we do have Neptune entering Aries, and we have a lot of activity happening in Pisces this month. So I'm going to draw a tarot card for March and see what we have for March 2025. Let me know what you're up to this month. Let me know what you're doing. We have the Four of Pentacles, where we're holding on to something, where we're holding something tightly to our chest. This card for me, it always really makes me think of the heart chakra, and Venus retrograde is associated with the heart chakra, where we're blocked off from love, where we're blocked off for connection, where we're blocked off financially. Retrogrades are often the times where we address a block in our life, where something is stopping us. And oftentimes with the retrogrades, because they're so internalized, we look inward and realize, oh, it's me. I'm the common denominator here. And of course, in terms of transits, if you have oppositions, sometimes it can be, you really are dealing with an opposing force. It's not to take that away from anybody, but it can be sometimes that when we're going through repetitive patterns, we have to look inward and say, okay, well, what's my belief on this? Or what am I doing in this? Or what am I really wanting with this? Sometimes we don't actually know. And especially with the Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde in Pisces, which is about the subconscious, we can have things revealed to us through our dreams. We can have things revealed to us through healing, therapy, reflection, meditation that are really holding us back. And retrogrades are time to look inward in order to reset, And with the North Node being connected to both retrogrades, we really truly are reflecting on what is going on inside in order to have change externally. First couple of months of the year, first 3 months, 4 months of the year, we have a lot of retrograde activity. Mars has just gone direct. And so we're doing a lot of reflection and internalization when it comes to what we're experiencing. It's not in vain. It is going to help us, release, surrender, and make appropriate changes going forward so that we're not in this stuck, held back energy. And it may be as well with this Venus retrograde and a lunar eclipse in Virgo, maybe it's time to let go of some stuff. Maybe it's time to let go of some material things in order to make space for some new energy to come in. That is what I have for March. I hope you have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Hi Aries, welcome to March 2025. Aries, you're a big player in the month of March when it comes to the astrological transits, because we have Venus retrograde in your sign, we have Mercury retrograde in your sign, we have a solar eclipse in your sign, and Neptune enters your sign. And if I could pick one that is, a huge change, it would be the fact that Neptune's entering your sign. That's so different for all of us. Nobody alive has experienced this transit, so it's a pretty big deal when it's in your sign. Obviously it's a 14-year transit, so you might not necessarily have huge impact coming in from the shift, but because it's happening within the day of a solar eclipse in your sign, it may just feel a little bit more like you're embodying that energy. So I'm going to get into that. Let's start with Venus retrograde in your sign. Venus goes retrograde in your sign on the 1st of March. You'll notice this most impactfully, Aries, if you have any Aries placements at 10 degrees, because that is the degree of station. Now, Venus retrograde in your first house. Venus is a benefic, so it's actually quite a nice energy. But in terms of making any permanent changes to your appearance, I would not recommend it. And I'm going to tell you now, you will want to. So you may start looking at your face, your body, your hair, and think, gosh, maybe I should do something with this. Maybe I should change something. Something feels off. I'm not so sure this looks right. Maybe I should try this drastically different hair color. Maybe I should try this drastically different procedure. Not recommended. Obviously, you have personal autonomy. You do what you like. But under this particular transit, I just would not recommend it as an astrologer. The reason being is that Venus, when in retrograde, kind of skews your perception of what looks good. So you could make a change that whenever Venus goes direct, you think, I don't like what this looks like anymore, or I don't know why I made this change. So I would think it's a better time to just reinvestigate your relationship to yourself, to your self-worth, to your self-confidence, reconnect with yourself. It can be actually a lovely time to pick up an old style, an old product, something that you used to use or wear that really worked on you. Because obviously, we change and we look for new ways to present ourselves, and sometimes we can move away from things that actually suit us very well. That can be a perfume, that can be a hairspray, it can be something pretty simple. But sometimes people reconnect with things that they used to wear or use whenever Venus is going retrograde in the first house that really actually did work for them. So you might pick up something that you used to do, an old style you used to have, or something of that nature. For you, it could absolutely be in the color red, because it is in the sign of Aries. Now, Mercury retrograde in your sign. Mercury goes retrograde from the 15th. It goes retrograde at 9 degrees of Aries. This is important because if you do have anything at 9 to 10 degrees, the retrogrades are very impactful for you in terms of the magnitude of reflection that you're doing and rethinking. And this is really important because the solar eclipse in Aries is at 9 degrees. So if you think about these retrogrades in your sign early on in the month, particularly in the first half, the reviewing and the reflecting that you're doing when it comes to you, your personality, your appearance, your personal goals, your wants, your needs, your desires, how you show up to the world, you're reflecting on the old so that you can embody a very new beginning, Aries, because the solar eclipse in your sign, some of you may be very focused on getting your own home, your own space, your own living situation, starting a family. You might be focused on buying property, that being a big part of your identity moving forward. And whatever the case is, Aries, this new beginning for you that's very personal with the solar eclipse, you get to bring your reflection and your, it's something that you may have missed from the past. You get to reinvestigate it, look at it, maybe release it, maybe reuse it, whatever the case is. You're looking backwards in order to begin something new for you personally, especially when it comes to your identity. Now, Neptune entering your sign the day after the eclipse means that when it comes to the energy that you're embodying going forward, you may notice that you're more forgiving. You may notice you're more compassionate. You may notice that you're more spiritual. You could be more interested in healing. And you could be more interested in transcending personal issues with yourself, with your identity, with your approach to the world. Neptune in the first house, I've experienced this for the last 14 years. Neptune in your first house is quite an amazing transit, I have to say, but it is 14 years long, so it'll take a long time to really understand the effects of it. But because for you it is coinciding with a solar eclipse in your sign, you really are embodying the energy of Neptune. So maybe a more spiritual style, a more spiritual approach to life. You may notice that you become a bit more psychic. You become a bit more clued into your intuition. Your dreams are a bit more vivid in terms of how they guide you with such a spiritual sign, a spiritual planet in your first house of self. So there's a lot of reflection going on for you this month, Aries, reflecting what it is that you want, particularly, as well, with your relationships to other people. Venus rules your relationships, it rules the significant other in your chart. That can be romantic, that can be business. With Venus retrograde in the first house, you can attract people back to you, people from the past. You can also be the one to reach out to people from the past. Now, I want to say Venus retrograde can be about running into exes, reconnecting with exes. Sometimes it's just a matter of hearing about them. Sometimes it's dreaming about them. Sometimes it is running into them. Sometimes it's about reuniting with them totally. But it varies. I'm not saying which way it's going to go, whatever. In terms of your personal relationships, I think with it being in your sign, you're really reflecting in terms of the balance in your dynamics and how it's working for you and how your needs are being met or how you're doing within the relationship space. And that doesn't have to be romantic either. It can be in any number of partnerships or relationships in your life. You're really reflecting on what it is that you need, Aries. Now, we also have a lot of activity in your 12th house because Venus retrograde enters your 12th house on the 27th. Mercury retrograde enters your 12th house on the 29th. And they're meeting up with Neptune, they're meeting up with the North Node, and Venus is meeting up with Saturn. So you might notice with that part of the reflection, Aries, that a lot of you are going to be doing some healing work from the past. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Aries risings actually got into therapy in the month of March, or were looking into some type of healing, whether that be a conventional route such as counseling or therapy, or whether it be a spiritual route such as maybe Reiki healing or, a shamanic journeying workshop or something of that nature. Whatever the case may be, I think a lot of you might be wanting to heal from the past, heal from past relationship wounds, heal from past communication issues, heal from old ways of thinking. A lot of you could have very vivid dreams. And I will say this as well. Sometimes when you have a planet like Saturn going through your 12th house, you can find yourself being confronted with ghosts of the past that you thought you were over and you thought you dealt with. And that's because now is the time to deal with them and clean them up, particularly as, Saturn is going to enter your sign in April. Isn't it April? No, it's May. Saturn is going to be entering your sign in May. So you may be finding that you're really wanting to clear up emotional baggage, traumas from the past in order to embrace the new beginnings that are being thrown at you this year, because a lot of this year is reinventing yourself, Aries, and beginning something new for yourself with the solar eclipse coming up in your sign. Now, this also applies to your health. We have a lot going on with your physical body. And we have a total lunar eclipse in the 14th in your health sector, which is the 6th house. It's Virgo. I think for a lot of you Aries, you might find with this lunar eclipse, you're really wanting to change your habits, changing your diet, changing your exercise routine, changing how you take care of your health. A lot of you are going to be releasing something that you ingest, whether that be a food, whether that be information, what you're taking in essentially and how that affects your body. I think a lot of you could make very significant health transformations under this lunar eclipse, very much focused on letting go of something that doesn't serve you. And I think with it being a total one, some of you could make some very significant changes in terms of your dietary status, going from carnivore to vegetarian or even vice versa. A lot of you could be making some significant changes as well with your job and how you approach work, how you approach your everyday working life. The services that you do, some of you could be leaving a job. You could have as well, if you have employees or co-workers, you could notice one of them is leaving, and this may change your working situation, your working dynamic. For a lot of you, I think in terms of March, really focus please on how you take care of yourself, how you look after yourself, your well-being, your physical health, your mental health as well. That eclipse is going to be opposite Saturn in your 12th. Allowing yourself to feel your feelings, allowing yourself to work through your feelings, and allowing yourself to heal from things that you've been carrying for a long time, and really figure out how to work and change your routines in a way that helps you feel better mind, body, and soul. Aries is really what I'm seeing for you for March. It is a month where it's pretty positive for you to get in touch with your healing and your sensitive side, and you may reconnect with people from the past. You may be able to finally let go of someone from the past. You may be able to let go of some habits that no longer serve you and some routines that no longer serve you as well, Aries. That's what I have for you, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Taurus, welcome to March. This is your horoscope for the month ahead. So Taurus, listen, we have quite a lot of activity happening this month in 3 signs. So we have a lot happening in Aries. Aries is your 12th house. We have a lot happening in Pisces, your 11th house. And we also have a total lunar eclipse in Virgo, which is your 5th house. So these are the areas of focus for March. Let's start with your 12th house. Now, the 12th house is very behind the scenes. It is a space of healing. It's a space of surrender, letting go. So that sounds fun. We have a Venus retrograde in that sector from the 1st, and we have a Mercury retrograde in that sector from the 15th. Now, those planets are going to retrograde both back into Pisces, but let's look at the 12th house first. So Venus is your ruling planet, which makes this more impactful for you. You'll feel very reflective. I think a lot of you may need more alone time than usual with Venus retrograde in your 12th house, Taurus. I think a lot of you might need time to recharge, time to heal. You might get a lot of joy from spending time alone. Some of you may be reflecting as well on past hurts, emotional baggage, trauma, pain from the past, with it being in the 12th house, particularly in terms of how you feel about yourself. Venus is your ruling planet, so your relationship to yourself. You're looking back maybe at past self-betrayals or self-deceptions, or maybe even, from other people as well. Let's not put all of it onto you, but it's that you're reflecting on how you feel about that or how it made you feel about yourself. This could be quite an introspective period, this part of the retrograde for you, because you're really craving some time to look inward, to retreat, to spend time by yourself. And if you're not, sometimes Venus retrograde can put you there involuntarily. So it can be, cancelled plans, or nobody can go to this thing, and so you have to stay in, and it gets you in a space of reflection and reevaluation. So Taurus, I think with this in mind, you may be having some very unusual dreams. You may be having some unusual messages come through in your dreams, particularly when Mercury retrogrades through that sector on the 15th. You may very well be thinking a lot about the past, thinking about how it shaped you, how it's changed you, how it has influenced your thought patterns. And I think for a lot of you, the focus there is on healing. Now, there's also a focus on your friendships and your social sector, because Venus retrograde enters that sector on the 27th, Mercury on the 29th. And of course, it is Pisces season until the 20th. So there's a good bit of focus on your friendships. A lot of you could have with Venus retrograde a bit of discord or tension with certain friends. There could be falling outs. There could be a sense of reflecting on your friendships and thinking, how balanced are these? How equal are these? Is this fair? Is this just, am I putting in more effort than them? Or maybe someone's telling you that they feel they're putting in more effort than you, whatever the case may be. It can bring up some tensions or cracks in friendships or in groups or in teams. There can be a bit of tension and a bit of strain. However, it can also be a time where you reconnect with friends from the past. So you might, if you've had a falling out with someone, this might be the time when you do the repair. This might reconnect you with people maybe that you used to be friends with, and maybe time and distance and space pulled you apart. It's interesting because the North Node is part of the Venus and Pisces retrograde cycle. So the reflection or the reconnection in your friendship sector or your group sector, or even the discord, can lead you in directions that you're meant to go. So do pay attention to that. Who's showing up in your life again? What have you learned? What direction are you going when it comes to friendships, groups, and teams? This is also to do with your vision of the future. So Venus retrograde here can sometimes shake up relationships that don't share the same vision. There's a solar eclipse in your 12th house on the 29th, and it's really interesting because Neptune is going to enter your 12th house the day after. Now, that's a 14-year cycle, so you're not going to notice immediate results, but because it coincides with a solar eclipse in that sign, this new beginning in your 12th house is really embodying the energy of Neptune. I think a lot of you are going to become very interested in healing, in the spiritual side of life if you're not already. This is going to be a very new beginning for you when it comes to your spiritual side, when it comes to retreating, when it comes to spending time alone, what you're focused on healing, what part of your healing journey that you're on. And I think for a lot of you, this can be something that, yes, you work on alone or privately, but Neptune ruling your 11th house in modern astrology of groups and teams, you might be focused on starting something new in a healing capacity with a group of people. So that could look for some of you like taking workshops. That could look for others of you like joining workshops with groups of people in spiritual matters. Or it could be that you're working on something behind the scenes that's a big, goal of yours for the future, Taurus, with that solar eclipse. It is going to be ruled by Mars, and Mars is going through your 3rd house. So I think for a lot of you, it could be writing related, community related, social media related. This is something that you're maybe working on behind the scenes or starting up quite privately, Taurus. Now, there's a total lunar eclipse in Virgo on the 14th. This is in your 5th house, and the 5th house is very creative. For some of you, you could be wrapping up or completing a creative project or endeavor around the time of this eclipse. For others of you, it can be to do with your love life. If you've been dating somebody, if there's been a romantic interest and it's not working, this may be a time when you're releasing it. It could have a karmic quality to it, with this being a South Node eclipse and opposite Saturn. But for others of you, this can be a time where maybe you're wrapping up a series of relationship patterns, maybe healing from an old romance, maybe healing from a past romance. No matter how long ago it was, this might be something that you're addressing or healing from under this total lunar eclipse. It can also be for some of you that there is a matter coming up in your children's lives, maybe something that they're wrapping up or completing in their life. There can be changes going on in their lives at this time that are quite notable when it comes to your kids. For others of you, this can be a time where you reconnect with an old flame from the past. That's probably only for a few of you, but you could reconnect with someone from the past who was a romantic interest, with this being in the 5th house. And there may be a very spiritual quality or connection with this person, if so, because it is ruled by Mercury in the 12th for you, and Mercury is going retrograde within a day of this eclipse. So for a lot of people, this eclipse is about clearing the past, working through the past, letting go of a certain chapter, but there's a continuation of review and reflection. So it's like whatever's happening at the time of this eclipse, you're really very much reflecting on it for the rest of March and even longer as to what needs to be reevaluated, what needs to change, your old ways of thinking as well when it comes to your love life, when it comes to your creative pursuits, and also when it comes to your children. Really reevaluating on your thinking and old thinking patterns is something that's coming up for you, Taurus. So that is what I have for you. I hope you have a wonderful month, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Gemini, welcome to March. Gemini, we have a lot of activity in 3 signs this month. We have major activity in 3 signs rather. Aries, Pisces, and Virgo. These are the signs of focus this month for you, Gemini. So we're looking at your 11th house of social networking, social interactions, groups, teams, friendships, your vision for the future. We're also looking at the 10th house, which is your career, your social status, your social standing, your long-term goals, your public persona. And we're also looking at Virgo, which is your home, your living situation, and your family. I actually want to start with the Virgo total lunar eclipse for you, Gemini. This is bringing up matters surrounding the home. This is bringing up matters surrounding your living environment. And it's a total lunar eclipse, so there could be a big change here. If you have placements at about 22, 23, 24 degrees of the mutable signs, so Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces, you may feel this eclipse more intensely, but we could really widen the degrees from like 20 to 25. This eclipse could bring about some sort of change in your living situation, your home, or your family. Now, it's ruled by Mercury, and Mercury at the time of this eclipse will be in your 11th house of the future, and Mercury is about to go retrograde. So for a lot of you with this eclipse, there could be changes happening in your family that, you know, change your view of the future, or you may have to rethink the details. You know, say for example, you and your partner or your spouse had bought a house and you really saw yourself living in there for 10 years, but maybe there's been a job change for your partner and now you're having to move and you're having to rethink your living situation, for example. That's just an example. It doesn't mean that's the way it's going to work out for you, but there can be a change of residence. There can be a change of where you're living, you know, buying a house, selling a house. This can be a time where maybe there's significant shifts happening in your family. You know, someone's moving out, someone's moving in, someone's getting married, someone's getting divorced. You know, big changes happening within your family. And it just seems to be having to, in order to navigate it, Gemini, you're having to reflect on the future and what the future looks like, and, you know, who you're going to be socializing with and who your social circle will be. So for a lot of you, there could be changes in your living situation, property matters, or even, you know, your family members, changes in their lives as well. Eclipses in the 4th house do tend to coincide with moves, but if they're not moves, they can be family developments. Now, looking at your 11th house, as I mentioned, this is to do with your vision of the future. A lot of you are really reflecting on that and what that looks like. We have a Venus retrograde and a Mercury retrograde in this sector. So for a lot of you, you may be thinking, are these the people that I want to associate with? Do I want to continue these friendships? Am I holding these friendships on for the wrong reasons? There can be some discord or miscommunication with friends this month, not just friends, teams, groups that you're a part of. It can be tricky to make plans with people. They can go awry. There can be miscommunication. There can be people dropping out of events and things. So I would say if you're making plans, try not to make plans that require, you know, deposits or require very solid commitments. You know, it could be a month where your plans and your events fluctuate quite a bit. And if not, there can also be misunderstandings when it comes to your social connections, Gemini. Venus is retrograde in that sector from the 1st. Mercury is retrograde in that sector from the 15th. This can also be a time when you do reconnect with old friends, though. You know, you might find yourself running into people that you used to be friendly with, that you used to be in a group with, a team with. And you could also find yourself reconnecting or, you know, maybe rekindling a friendship that fell apart at one point as well, Gemini. But those planets both retrograde into your career sector as well. So if you work in a team with people, if you work in a group, you may find that there's some tension when it comes to who's doing what, who's the leader, for example. When they retrograde back into your 10th house, so Venus goes retrograde into your 10th house, or retrogrades back rather into your 10th house in the 27th, Mercury in the 29th. This is where you get very reflective on your goals. And if you think of the 11th house and the 10th house together, goals and aspirations are very prominent this month. You're really rethinking those. What do they look like? What do you want? How do you want the future to be? You may find yourself having some issues with a boss this month, or at work or career with people in authority. There can be misunderstandings, but also some of you could find that someone from your career past reaches out. Maybe they have an opportunity for you, maybe they have a job for you that could lead you in new directions. You know, the North Node is there. So maybe some reconnection to the past in your career or some misunderstanding in your career could actually lead you in a rather fated new direction, or help you learn some sort of lesson or complete some sort of cycle when it comes to your career. But I think, you know, 6 months from now, we have a total lunar eclipse in your career sector, Gemini. So in terms of your career, or if it's not career, your goals, your public image, your public persona, there could be some significant shifts. And this month helps you maybe clear the space, clear the decks when it comes to your career. You know, let go of outdated thinking, ways of thinking, outdated ways of relating, or relationships that are not helpful when it comes to your goals, your career, or your public image. You know, sometimes, Gemini, you can see people who have, you know, a very questionable friend, or they keep very questionable company, and it can really, you know, even if they're a good person, it can tarnish their reputation, for example. So that might be a case that applies to you, or it might just be that, you know, you realize you've outgrown certain social circles or networks, or, you know, maybe a friend lets you down this month or something of that nature, and it has you reflecting on the balance in your friendships and your relationships. And this could actually be leading you to new friends, because we have a solar eclipse coming up on the 29th, 9 degrees of Aries, the very degree that Mercury went retrograde at. So maybe the changes are leading you in new directions, new friendships, new groups, new teams to join, new networks to become a part of, new friends that feel like home, feel like family, who share your values, who really understand what matters in your connections. And you may find yourself connecting with more spiritual, forgiving, compassionate people with Neptune entering that sector on the 30th. You know, you might find that you're connecting with people who are quite, uh, you could actually find yourself befriending some psychics, some mystics, some spiritual folk, or just people who are very compassionate and forgiving. And, you know, you may even find yourself, as I say, this month, forgiving a friend from the past, or reconnecting with a friend from the past, or something of that nature. But I also think a lot of you may be exploring, you know, your spiritual side when it comes to the groups and teams that you're a part of. So maybe going to, you know, a spiritual festival or a spiritual network, or connecting with friends who have um, quite a Neptunian vision. So that's very, you know, it's so ethereal and elusive and hard to describe, Neptune, but I think the message is there. It's about connecting with people who are maybe a bit more on the spiritual side, and also you maybe wanting a more, you know, maybe having a bit more of a rose tinted view of the future actually as well for you, Gemini. You might feel a little bit more hopeful when Neptune enters your 11th house about the future, and a little bit idealistic. Obviously with Neptune, this is a 14-year transit, so sometimes it can bring pockets of time in your life when you connect with people who are maybe a bit deceptive, or who are a little bit elusive, or who are a little bit hard to pin down, and those types of things. But then on the other hand, you can connect with people who are spiritual, people who are mystical and magical as well, and it can really help you manifest the future that you want. The 11th house is about manifestation. Neptune's very vision oriented, very dreamy, very imaginative. It may be easier for you to imagine the type of future that you want, and with that solar eclipse, really put a new beginning in place that matches your more idealized vision. That's what I have for you, Gemini, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Cancer, welcome to your March horoscope. So Cancer, there's a lot happening this month, and a lot of it is very contained in 3 signs specifically. So we're looking at Aries, Pisces, and Virgo this month. Aries for you is your 10th house, so there's quite a lot of talk this month when it comes to career or long-term goals, or your public image, your public persona. And then we have a lot of activity in Pisces, which for you, Cancer, puts focus onto your religious or spiritual beliefs, also your travel plans, and your higher education. So these areas are very highlighted, but we also have this total lunar eclipse in Virgo, which for you is to do with your 3rd house, you know, your local community. It's to do with your car, your gadgets, your communication, your style of communication, the tools that you use to communicate, your phone, your laptop. It's also your siblings. It's quite a broad, busy house, I have to say. So we'll try and cover all bases. I'm going to start for you, Cancer, with Venus retrograde in your 10th house. Venus is retrograde in your 10th house from the 1st to the 27th of the month. Then Venus retrograde enters Pisces, your 9th. Mercury goes retrograde in your 10th house on the 15th, and then re-enters the 9th house on the 29th. So in particular, from, you know, the 15th to the 27th, we have 2 planets retrograding in your career sector. And then from the 29th onwards, we have them in your 9th house of, as I said, spiritual, religious views, etc. So when it comes to your career this month, Cancer, It's a big focus. A lot of you are looking back in order to move forward. So you're reflecting on your relationship to the people that you work with, your connections in your career, your boss. There can be a bit of discord, a bit of friction when it comes to your relationships to authority figures in your career. There can be a little bit of friction when it comes to bosses, authority figures, parents, misunderstandings, miscommunication, etc. And it can really show the cracks in those relationships. It can also be when it comes to your career, you're just reevaluating what matters to you. You're reevaluating what you get out of your career, and maybe you're thinking, well, actually, I'd quite like to align with something a bit different. I think some of you could be realigning with something that you get to be yourself in Cancer. So the reason I say that is because we're leading up to this solar eclipse in Aries. It's on the 29th. It's in your career sector, but it's ruled by Mars in your first house, Mars in Cancer. So you're really thinking when it comes to your career and your plans going forward, what am I good at? What are my natural skills? What are my natural abilities? How do I want to, be in my career? Can I be myself? Can I show up as myself? Do I have energy for this? Can be something that you're maybe thinking as well when it comes to your career. There's a new chapter coming in, and I think you really want to show your more Cancerian qualities and really show more of yourself going forward. And it's interesting because when it comes to your career, Cancer, there's a really big shift in that Neptune is entering your career sector. Now, obviously, this is 14 years in terms of a transit. The effects aren't always immediate and they don't always affect you directly, immediately, or for long periods of time, but it is an influence. And because Neptune is entering this sector the day after an eclipse, it really colors your new beginning. It means that when it comes to your career, a lot of you are going to want to transcend your connection to your career. Maybe you're not looking for status anymore. Maybe you're not looking for maybe you're not looking to be the CEO. Maybe you're not looking to be on the Forbes list. Maybe you're not looking to be a manager. Whatever the case is, I think some of you are thinking, I want to use my career to help people. I want to use my career to have a higher meaning, a higher purpose. There's a spiritual component to it. You want to share information to the masses. There's something about it where you feel like it has a spiritual link. You feel like you have a purpose. You feel like you have a divine connection. You want the connection to the divine in your career. That doesn't look the same as everybody. I'm not saying you're going to become the next pope. What I'm saying is that you're probably going to want to go down a path that you feel is divinely guided to you. However that looks, Cancer, I think a lot of you are really wanting to go in a direction where you get to show up as you are and you get to bring a more nurturing, healing quality to your career going forward. So that'll be an interesting one to observe for you. We also have a lot of activity happening in your 9th house. So this is where, Venus retrograde enters the 9th house, 27th, Mercury in the 29th. This could be a time where you're maybe revisiting somewhere that you traveled before, you're going back to somewhere you used to love, you're wanting to take a vacation. If you are, just bear in mind, there can be some discord with people you meet on your travels. There can also be some issues at the airport with your flight, and I don't mean that in a scary way. Please don't think I'm telling you that. I just mean in terms of, you get to the airport, you realize you've forgotten your passport, or your flight gets delayed by a couple of hours. I remember Mercury being retrograde and I traveled and I kid you not, I got stranded in a country that I was not visiting. The flight what's the word? The flight was delayed, and then I had to get a connecting flight, and then I had to stay overnight in Germany, and the journey was not to Germany. But I kind of liked that story. So even though it was an inconvenience, and I ended up getting home, I think like a couple of days later than planned, I actually really enjoyed the experience and the story, and it was kind of interesting. Mercury retrograde makes for more interesting travel plans, but I'm just letting you know that there can be hiccups, so try to remain flexible, I guess, is the long-winded way I had to explain that. Just remain flexible when it comes to travel plans. Be extra diligent if you can. You need your passport to get on that flight. Don't leave it in the printer like I did one Mercury retrograde. Learn by my mistakes. You know, make sure you have the details right, make sure you have a book if you get delayed, all that kind of stuff. Just be extra prepared if you are traveling, Cancer, in the second half of the month. You may also run into people that you used to go to university with or college with. If you're in university or college, there could be some issues with relationships there, especially to teachers or mentors or even mentees. You may find as well with this retrograde that you're really reflecting on your spiritual beliefs and your spiritual perspectives, and you know, maybe you're having to reevaluate how you communicate about those things or the information that you're taking in or what you're learning. Some of you might pick up an old book that you used to read that is spiritual in nature, or it's to do with the higher meaning of it all. It's philosophical perhaps. And this could be something that maybe you didn't finish before. It could be a podcast, or it could be a source of information that you didn't get to finish, but now you're interested in it again and it's the time. I do believe that that happens sometimes. I think there are certain time periods where maybe you're actually not meant to read that book, and other time periods where maybe you actually are. And so you pick it up again. And speaking of information, Cancer, there's this total lunar eclipse in Virgo on the 14th. There could be a change happening for you with a sibling. Your relationship to a sibling may change. Some of you may get important information at the time of this eclipse pertaining to your career, pertaining to your work, pertaining to your boss. You might get an email, a letter, a document, something that is pertaining to your career matters, or you know, whoever your boss or a figure of authority is. It might be pertaining to an authority figure more generally. It can also be that maybe there's a change in terms of your car, your vehicle, gadgets, phones, laptops, that sort of thing. When it comes to your job, when it comes to your career, if you have a company car or you have a company telephone or something of that nature under this eclipse, something may change. It can also be for you that perhaps you are experiencing changes in your neighborhood. Your neighbors may change. Your neighbor may, for example, move away for a job or something of that nature. There can be changes for you quite locally around the time of this eclipse, Cancer. Maybe you're having to change your car, maybe you're having to change your telephone, that kind of thing. Mercury goes retrograde the day after, but it is in your career sector. So I think when it comes to phones, gadgets, cars, you're looking at it through the lens of career. You may also change your commute when it comes to your job. You might decide that you don't want to, you know, maybe you're wanting to work from home. You're not wanting to travel for your job. If your job requires a lot of travel, you're thinking, I don't really want to do this anymore. I need to make a change. So maybe that's why you're reflecting on your career and thinking, maybe I should look a little bit more closer to home, Cancer. But all in all, it's an interesting month where you're really reevaluating on the future in order to change it, essentially. With that solar eclipse coming up, you're thinking long term and you're thinking in terms of your goals, what suits you, what works for you. And so going forward, you're probably going to have to look backwards in order to move forward. In order to shape that future, you're having to reflect on what your previous goals, wishes, aspirations, and career actually was, in order to embrace new changes that are more true, I think, to who you are. That's what I have for you, Cancer, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Leo, welcome to March. So Leo, there's a lot of activity happening in 3 signs this month: Aries, Pisces, and Virgo. So I'm going to start with the total lunar eclipse in Virgo on the 14th for you, Leo, because this is really putting the focus onto your finances, onto your values, and onto what you have, you know, your possessions, that type of thing. This total lunar eclipse for you, Leo, it looks a little bit like a clean out. It looks a little bit like a declutter. It looks like you might be getting rid of some material possessions. Because it's in the sign of Virgo, maybe you're getting very organized. Maybe you're getting very, you know, you're doing a spring clean, a deep clean or something like that, and you're wanting to get rid of stuff. You know, you're wanting to get rid of material items, possessions, things that don't spark joy, or whatever the case may be. You could definitely be doing a bit of a clean out, a bit of a clear out. And it may be to help with your mental health. You know, it might be that you feel bogged down by a lot of possessions and you feel like if you clear out a lot of stuff, you'll have a bit more room to think, to breathe, or it'll be more manageable for you to keep, Leo. For a lot of you as well, this can be a financial change. So maybe for some of you, you are changing jobs, or you're maybe making a lot of, you know, I think a lot of you could be spending money on travel at this time, like maybe making a big payment on a holiday or a big payment on university or college. The reason being is that Mercury is the ruler of this eclipse and it's in your ninth house. And the ninth house is travel, it's higher education, it's spiritual, religious, that type of thing. So a lot of you could be spending money on something like that, you know, travel, education, that kind of thing, or your spending on that sector could be changing. So maybe you're thinking, maybe there's a change in terms of your financing arrangement when it comes to university or something like that, Leo. But it does put a lot of focus onto your finances and your values and also your material possessions. I think a lot of you may also be thinking in terms of your belief system, what truly matters to you. You're looking at your beliefs and your higher vision through the lens of what is true to my personal values, and also what gives me confidence, what gives me self-esteem with this total lunar eclipse. Now, speaking of the ninth house, Venus goes retrograde in your ninth house in the 1st, Mercury goes retrograde in your ninth house in the 15th. And in the first half of the month with the retrogrades here, I think a lot of you could very well be traveling at this time. Now, I just want to mention this. With Mercury retrograde in your ninth house and Venus retrograde, if you are traveling, there can be a few hiccups and a bit of tension and discord as you go. That's not to dissuade you, but when Venus is retrograde in a particular sector, sometimes it can be that little bit more difficult to get along with people in that sector. So, that could be just an unpleasant interaction in an airport, or that could be you travel somewhere and you find the people where you are a bit cold, or it can just be that maybe you feel a little bit like it's not as aesthetically pleasing as you thought it would be wherever you're going. Mercury retrograde can mean that there's issues with passports, airport delays, that type of thing, hiccups essentially. But I do find that Mercury retrograde in the ninth, if you are traveling, it does tend to make the most interesting stories in the long run. So it's not to say you shouldn't ever travel when Mercury is retrograde here, but just be that little bit more due diligent. Make sure you have your passport, make sure you have copies of your passport, make sure that you know your flight times, make sure that you're prepared for delays, because they tend to occur more so when Mercury is retrograde. In terms of travel plans, you may travel somewhere that you have been before with Venus retrograde there as well. I also think for a lot of you, Leo, you may reconnect with people who you went to university with, college with, or people that you maybe had, a long distance connection with, whether that be romantic or not. You might reconnect with someone who lives abroad, for example. When they both retrograde into your 8th house, they're joining the North Node. So Venus goes retrograde into your 8th house in the 27th, or I say Venus goes retrograde in the 1st, but re-enters, is what I'm trying to say, on the 27th, your 8th house. Mercury re-enters your 8th house on the 29th. So we've got this focus on your 8th house, and I think for the majority of you, this is very much linked to your personal emotional baggage. Okay, now it can be that it's to do with your significant other's money as well. There could be some changes going on with your partner's finances if you have one, with their, how you benefit from them financially. So that can be insurance, that can be healthcare, that can be their money and how you put it into your home, or shared resources, shared accounts, that type of thing. It can also be money from the government. There can be some changes here. There can be some miscommunications here as well, and some frustrations there as well. The 8th house can also be psychological. Some of you may be wanting to look back at the past in order to heal from it. The 8th house is oftentimes where we notice patterning, we notice past trauma, we notice past baggage, and with retrogrades there, we can sometimes go over it again in order to heal from it. Sometimes that's a pretty big, I think a lot of the time that's a big part of any healing journey, is reflecting on stuff that's not necessarily the most pleasant to look at. But it can really help you heal. The North Node is putting you in the direction of connecting more deeply, more intimately with other people. And this may require you to, share information with them that's hard to share, or talk about past experiences, or, go on your own kind of healing journey or something of that nature. And I think that's quite important to you overall, Leo, because even the eclipse that's coming up on the 29th, it's going to be ruled by Mars in your 12th. So you're looking at new beginnings, new beliefs, new adventures, through the lens of the healing that you're doing, the inner work that you're doing. And I think for a lot of you, with so much happening in the 8th, you'll notice that it's more, I won't say it's easier to, but it's more in your nature to connect with people by being vulnerable, by sharing your fears, by sharing your past experiences and that type of thing, and really doing, you know, doing yourself a favor by working through anything that's holding you back and breaking patterns and breaking cycles and feeling liberated and feeling like you're excited for the next chapter, the next big adventure, because you're releasing what no longer serves you, Leo. I know that that doesn't always sound fun with the 8th house, because the 8th house is where we, transform by destroying. So sometimes we have to go through this metamorphosis process. We have to release old patterns or things that don't necessarily feel right, but they've become comfortable. And it can also be a time where, it feels as though sometimes with the 8th house you have to look at things you don't really want to look at. And Venus and Mercury retrograde there can sometimes bring it back, looking at you. It can sort of bring back experiences or triggers, for want of a better word, that have you in your feelings and have you doing your healing work and things like that. But it is all to serve a purpose. Now, for some of you, it doesn't have to be that. It can actually just be that, you're allowing yourself to rely a little bit more on other people's resources and allowing yourself to be in sharing connections. And as I say, also being more vulnerable with people by generating more emotional intimacy and honesty in your life as well, Leo. And that's not just in romantic relationships. That's being more open and vulnerable in your friendships and your social connections, in your work, even that kind of thing. Now, that solar eclipse that I mentioned in the 29th, so we talked about the reflection, the review that you're doing in your 9th house. This solar eclipse is a new beginning for you when it comes to travel, when it comes to higher education. Some of you could be going back to school, taking on a degree, taking on a master's. And with Mars being in the 12th house at the time of this eclipse and being the ruler of this eclipse, it could be something you're working on very privately. You're working on behind the scenes. Some of you could be going on a very private spiritual or religious journey, a new chapter in your life that maybe you want to keep hush hush. Neptune is entering that sector on the 30th. This is a big deal because Neptune changes signs every 14 years. We've never had Neptune in Aries in our lifetimes before. For you, with it being in the 9th house, you're sort of coming into this very compassionate energy when it comes to what you believe in, what you're studying. So when it comes to religion, you might find yourself becoming that bit more spiritual and compassionate and forgiving through your spiritual or religious beliefs or your philosophical beliefs. You could also find yourself, traveling to different locations that feel very mystical and magical and ethereal. It can also be that you're studying, the mysteries of life. You're studying about the subconscious. You're studying about dreams. You're studying the metaphysical, that kind of thing, Leo. And that can be a big part of, this new chapter for you, these new adventures. They can be quite spiritual and, as I said, for some of you, quite religious in nature. Or it can be that you're beginning a new chapter, an adventure in your life that's going to open you up to more compassion, and maybe it's just going to be a little bit more of you can have some really magical, mystical experiences when Neptune travels through your 9th house. You can travel somewhere that just feels like paradise, or you can travel somewhere where you have a spiritual experience. And whatever adventure that you're going on, I feel that it's going to be very healing for you, and I feel like it's going to be something that helps you transcends doubts that you had about your beliefs, doubts that you had about your intelligence also, your ability to learn as well. You're going to transcend fears or blocks or barriers when it comes to your own intelligence, Leo. That's something that may be coming up for you. And you might be wanting to study something, as I say, that's quite spiritual or magical in nature. Kind of like going to Hogwarts, but obviously Hogwarts does not exist. But you might be going somewhere to study something that's very magical and mystical over the next 14 years, bear in mind. So don't be too quick to write it off if it doesn't happen just yet. But that solar eclipse is ushering in a new beginning when it comes to adventure for you. And I think you may need to reflect on your relationship to adventure or your beliefs before it comes in, but it will be worth it in the long run. That's what I have for you, Leo, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Virgo, welcome to March 2025. It might just change your life. Virgo, we have a total lunar eclipse in your sign and it's happening at 23 degrees of Virgo. So if you pull up your birth chart, notice if you have any factors at about 20 to 25 of Virgo, of Pisces, of Sagittarius, and of Gemini, because the eclipse will be impacting you most directly. But for all Virgo risings and some Virgo suns and some Virgo moons, this eclipse is going to be bringing a significant change in terms of your relationship to yourself. So your identity, your image, your appearance. And this might be something that you're already aware of, because the South Node entered your sign in January. So some of you might have been shedding old identities, old styles, a certain aesthetic, the way that you styled yourself, the clothes that you wear, the way that you did your makeup, the way that you approached taking care of yourself may have been changing since January, and this eclipse could be a significant shift in terms of how you show up to the world, what you look like, how you appear. Now, I think for a lot of you, with the ruler of this total lunar eclipse being Mercury in your 8th house, there's a significant transformation for many of you going on physically, but also just with your identity and your approach to life. And some of you may find that you're engaging in quite transformative practices or conversations, maybe with a therapist. The 8th house is to do with our psychological patterns and baggage. You could be working with a therapist in order to heal your relationship to yourself. Say, for example, you have body dysmorphia or something like that with the 1st house, or you just have some unresolved issues in terms of your appearance, your identity, your personality, something to forgive yourself for. I don't know, Virgo, whatever it is, it'll be different for everybody, but you may be working through some of these issues or some of these patterns. For some of you, it can also be to do with your debt, your shared financial resources. You may be rethinking your approach to that or how it's affecting you. So essentially, with this total lunar eclipse, a lot of you could be going through a significant change of self, and the closer it is to 23 degrees, the more impactful it feels. But with the South Node being there, I think a lot of you are, shedding perfectionistic tendencies, the need to look perfect, be seen as perfect, appear as perfect, the need to get it right all the time, right down to the detail. That might be something you're working through at this time, and forgiving yourself for your mistakes, your flaws, or just embracing your natural essence with this total lunar eclipse, Virgo. Now, we do have a lot of activity happening in that 8th house for you. Venus goes retrograde in the 8th house in the 1st. Mercury, which is your ruling planet, so you really are focused in this area, is retrograde in that sector in the 15th. The 8th house is to do with, as I said, transformation, working through long-standing issues, transforming yourself, working through your mindset, facing fears. You could be going through past baggage and bringing in some sort of healing transformative practice, whether that be by traditional therapy or whether that be by the occult, maybe seeing an astrologer, maybe seeing a breathwork practitioner, shaman, whatever the case is for you, Virgo. It's, individual. But with Venus retrograde in this sector and Mercury retrograde in this sector, you may also be rethinking, reevaluating your joint financial relationships. So say you're married to someone and you have a property together. Say you're in business with someone and you have a loan together. There could be some miscommunication around these things. I wouldn't sign up for anything new, especially in the first half of the month when it comes to joint financial assets or resources. So I wouldn't be saying to someone, hey, should we get, saying to your partner, hey, should we get this credit card? Should we go for this loan? Should we go for this mortgage? Just because there could be a lot more back and forth than you think, and it may not look the same in a month's time. You might have overlooked an important detail. Something may have seemed better than it was, for example. So you're reevaluating your shared financial relationships, your joint resources with another person, but it can also be your loans, mortgages from the government, grants from the government, inheritance, that type of thing, that you're really reevaluating in the first half of the month. There can be arguments with someone that you're in a joint financial arrangement with, or it can be that there's some frustrations with the process of maybe getting a loan or a grant or something of that nature. Virgo, it certainly could be delayed. But I think for a lot of you, it's really looking like a bit of psychological or soul exploration for you when it comes to your relationship with yourself. However, your relationship to others is also highlighted, and some of you may be needing to, work through some issues personally on your own with that total lunar eclipse in your sign so that you can be ready for connection. Now, this can be romantic connection, this can be business connection, this can be just relating to other people that little bit better. We have a Venus retrograde in your 7th house, and then we also have Mercury retrograde in your 7th house. Venus goes retrograde in the 1st, it retrogrades back into Pisces in the 27th. Mercury re-enters Pisces on the 29th via retrograde. So essentially, especially in the last quarter of the month, you may be revisiting past relationships. So this can also bring up a sense of maybe exploring past relationship patterns. Why did this go this way? Why do I choose this type of partner? Why do I not choose that type of partner? Why do we keep having this argument in a relationship? Why do we keep, it's that kind of energy, really reflective, really reevaluating your relationships that little bit deeper. This can also cause a bit of miscommunication and trouble in an existing relationship. Doesn't have to be a breakup though. It can just be, a spot of needing to work through and reevaluate the balance in the relationship and who's doing what and how that's working for you. You may realize under this particular transit, Virgo, that some of your relationships are quite unbalanced and they need to be reconfigured, or your life generally is out of balance when it comes to your connection to other people. So you're rethinking that. Some of you could reconnect with someone from the past with Venus retrograde, but reconnection can mean many things. It can mean running into an ex from the past. I have a Venus retrograde story, and that I ran into an ex who's a Virgo rising recently, so I was the ex. But it can just be running into someone, catching up, seeing how they're doing, hearing from somebody generally, seeing them across a room, hearing about them. It doesn't have to be a formal reconnection or reuniting with an ex, but it can be something that maybe gives you closure, or something that maybe changes the way that you're viewing relationships, or something that maybe helps put you in a new direction, because we have the North Node here. If you reconnect with someone from your past, Virgo, and if you're in a relationship, this can be reconnecting with a friend, this can be reconnecting with a business partner, you reconnect with a significant relationship in your life. There may be growing yet to do with this person because of the North Node's influence to Venus retrograde in Pisces, but it can just as easily be, the closure you need to move in new directions relationship-wise. This Venus retrograde in Pisces cycle for you can be very fated. It will test the boundaries in your relationship because of its connection to Saturn, and it will test the commitments in your relationship too. And you may emerge from this period stronger. You may emerge from this period thinking that you're not, wanting to stay in a relationship, or you may leave this period thinking that you want to change your attitudes to relationships more generally. So it can manifest in various different ways, as you see. It's not just generally a breakup. It's not just, reuniting with an ex once and for all. It can be a bit more subtle than that. But regardless of where it falls in the subtle scale, with the North Node, it is to help you grow through relationships and go in exciting new directions that are quite fated, Virgo. We have a solar eclipse coming up in Aries on the 29th. Now, this is where there may be, over the next 6 months, a new beginning triggered for you when it comes to your joint financial resources. So the ruler of this eclipse, Mars, is in your 11th house. So a lot of you are putting a financial plan in place that is better for your future, or you have the future in mind, goals, aspirations. This could be a time where maybe you are setting a new plan to clear away debt. You're setting a plan to get a mortgage, to get a loan, based on your future aspirations, with Mars being in Cancer at that time. Neptune also enters this sector on the 30th, the day after the eclipse. This is brand new terrain for us all. Neptune is a planet of forgiveness and compassion. So some of you might be, with the 8th house, doing some very significant spiritual work when it comes to your emotional baggage, past traumas, that type of thing. With Neptune, this is where you really look to spiritual healers to help you with your issues, or you're really focused on forgiveness of something that's happened in the past, whether that be for a person, an experience, you working through some something you need to heal through the lens of compassion and healing, but there does seem to be a spiritual perspective here. So a lot of you might be finding with Neptune going into this sector that you're wanting to heal from something from the past. You're wanting to heal a pattern, and you're wanting to forgive a pattern in your life so that you can feel more connected, I think, to the vision of the future that you want. You may be transcending some personal issues. You might be transcending some issues with grief. You may be transcending some issues with yourself. You may be transcending some issues with finances. With Neptune being here, it's a 14-year transit, so it doesn't have to manifest right away, but because of its proximity to this eclipse, I think a lot of you are probably looking for a new path in the 8th house to maybe get closer to people. You know, when you have a lot of planets in one month in the 7th and 8th house of Virgo, this is all about your relationships. It's all about your connections and the healing that you need to do there, the things that you need to work through, reevaluate, reassess, rethink. With Venus and Mercury both retrograde in these sectors, it can also trigger a bit of jealousy, a bit of suspicion, a bit of paranoia. You may be dealing with past betrayals in terms of, you know, relationship issues. With the 8th house, you may be dealing with fears of sharing with others. You know, maybe going into a financial arrangement with somebody else is scary for you, so you avoid relationships in general with that 8th house, or you may be having to heal fears surrounding intimacy and closeness. But that can also be, Virgo, with the total lunar eclipse, that you're working through some fears and issues that you have with yourself or your own ability to take up space in the world. But it's a very interesting month for you, Virgo, and good luck. Talk to you soon. Hi Libra, welcome to March 2025. So Libra, as I've been saying to the other signs, there's a lot of astrological build-up in, well, 2 signs in particular, but 3 have special significance this month. We have Aries, Pisces, and Virgo. So let's talk about Aries for you, Libra, because this is all about your partnerships and your relationships. And I'm going to cover, you know, the spectrum of where you might be on that scale, whether you're coupled, married, single. This is simply a time when you're reevaluating and you're reflecting your relationships more generally. Okay, so Venus is going retrograde. Venus is your ruler. So when Venus goes retrograde, you may feel a little bit less like yourself. You may not be so sure what suits you, if you want to change your image, if you want to change your style. You might not feel necessarily as much like yourself personality-wise. Maybe you don't feel as charming or as witty or as graceful or anything like that, because Venus tends to skew our perception of things, and Venus being your ruler, you may feel that quite closely. Now Venus is retrograde in your 7th house of relationships, and Mercury enters that sector in the 3rd and goes retrograde in the 15th. So when it comes to your relationships, you're in this period of reevaluation and reflection when it comes to a wide spectrum of relationships. It doesn't just have to be romantic, it doesn't just have to be a spouse. It can be about exes. You would probably be one of the signs where the Venus retrograde, running into an ex, hearing about an ex, hearing from an ex, or any of those different manifestations, you're the most likely to experience something like that. Now, please just note that astrology is not always as intense as it sounds. You might just simply hear of an ex, or you might just see them across the street and not talk to them. But essentially with the retrograde, Venus is about reevaluating and reassessing our connections. So maybe seeing an ex across the street triggers a memory in you, brings realization of a pattern, brings closure. It can manifest in many different ways, but it is there for a reason. So it's there to help you heal. It's there to help you with your relationship to yourself. For some of you though, you could reunite with somebody, but I think for a lot of you, you're sort of looking backwards to reassess and do a bit of healing when it comes to your relationships so that you can move forward, because there is a solar eclipse coming up in Aries, your 7th house, on the 29th, and this is closing out the series of eclipses we've had in your 1st house, 7th house axis since 2023. And this solar eclipse brings with it, Libra, a new beginning in your relationship life. So a new chapter in your relationship story, in your You know, if you're single, this can be a new relationship coming in. If it's a new relationship coming in, Libra, you may very well meet them through career. You may also find that there's a new business partnership coming up for you. This can be a relationship that helps you achieve your goals, particularly your career goals. Neptune is also entering the sector on the 30th, so some of you could really connect with someone who's compassionate, someone who's a soulmate, someone who is spiritual. Neptune going through the 7th house, it's a 14-year transit, so it can manifest at different times in different ways, but it is bringing this flavor to your 7th house of relationships, whereby you may be more attracted to spiritual people. You may have very romanticized views of relationships. You may also find that on the positive, soulmate, unconditional love; on the negative, deception, not seeing someone clearly for who they are. It can manifest, it's a spectrum, essentially. But because it's happening so closely to this solar eclipse, I think the new chapter in your relationship is really colored by Neptune. So looking for a real soulmate, looking for someone that you feel you can do a lot of healing with, or a lot of healing within your relationship patterns. I think for a lot of you, this can be a new partner. If you're single, or if it's a new chapter in your relationship life, it's like you have a shared goal with a partner. You have something that you're working to together, something that you're focused on in terms of the long range future. You know, you might go into business together, you might start a business together, you might begin a professional relationship within your current relationship, or something of that nature, Libra. For some of you, this can be, you know, solar eclipses can be as well, believe it or not, when you do exit a relationship. And if you're exiting a relationship, you might be more focused on your career or your social status. That could be a reason for the change. Breakups can occur, of course, with Venus retrograde in the 7th house, as they are. You know, in March, Venus is retrograded in the 7th from the 1st to the 27th. But breakups are just one manifestation of Venus retrograde. They can also happen under many transits. So if you're in a solid place with your partnership, don't worry about it. If you know it's going to end, that might be the time when you think, because Venus is your ruler, you think, I deserve better than this, or I deserve more. But for a lot of people, it can just be bumps in the road in relationships, so that you reevaluate that connection. As I say, it doesn't always have to be so extreme. But with Mercury retrograde there from the 15th to the 29th, you could have some communication issues. Now, there's a total lunar eclipse in your 12th house, Libra. This is an interesting one because it's ruled by Mercury in your 7th. The 12th house is the essence of letting go, and a total lunar eclipse is also the essence of letting go and releasing. The 12th house can be where we release through the subconscious, you know, dreams. We get to grips with what is running the show behind the scenes, or we also figure out what we're doing behind the scenes. It can bring about an ending process. It can bring about release. It can bring about surrender, letting go. Because it's ruled by Mercury in your 7th, some of you very well may be letting go of a relationship, but some of you may also be letting go of relationship stories that you have, you know, the stories that you tell yourself about others, the stories that you tell yourself about your relationship patterns or your relationship journey or trajectory. You may be changing the way you communicate with a partner, or the way you communicate with yourself about relationships more generally. Eclipses in the 12th house can be times where we really get to grips with our unconscious mind, and we do some healing work, and we do some releasing, letting go. There can be a bit of an emotional purge sometimes with a total lunar eclipse in the 12th. It can also bring a lot of focus to your health and your well-being, Libra, and I want to talk about that as well. This can be a time of a job change for you, because it is in an opposition to Saturn in the 12th. So when it comes to your responsibilities and your karma, you may be leaving a job, exiting a job, or someone may be doing that around you. We do have a Venus, you know, the Venus retrograde occurs in your 7th, but it moves back into your 6th from the 27th. Mercury moves into that sector from the 29th. And this is really where you're reevaluating your relationship to your co-workers, your employees, to your job, to your services. You're maybe struggling with people that you work with a little bit, some misunderstandings, some miscommunication, some frustrations with your colleagues or your employees. It can also be when it comes to your health, you're reevaluating your habits, what's important to you health-wise, what you're prioritizing, making some reevaluations when it comes to your day-to-day routines and experiences. Venus retrograde here can sometimes be where you have trouble when, you know, it can be something as subtle as when you go to a restaurant, you get a server who is not pleasant. Venus retrograde here because sometimes people who provide you services can be a bit off with Venus retrograde. That can also be if you're getting a haircut, which is, you know, if you are, Venus retrograde is not really the time to do anything drastic or exceptionally different. It can be a time though when it comes to styles that you return to the past. So you go back to something that you know suited you before, or you go back to a hairdresser, or you go back to someone who provided you a service that you've not seen in a while. You know, you might reconnect with people you used to work with. You might reconnect with people who styled you, people who served you, people who provided you a service that maybe you've not seen in a while. It can also be with Venus retrograde in the 6th that you reconnect with a personal trainer, or you go back to a certain gym that you used to go to, or you take back up an exercise routine or regimen that you enjoyed before Libra. So you might be reconnecting with old ways of looking after yourself, old ways of you know, taking care of your health, taking care of your well-being, old wellness practices that maybe have just fallen by the wayside for whatever reason. This is not really a time to invest in new activewear. It's not a time to seek out new medical professionals, new personal trainers. It's more a time of reconnection, but it can also be a time of reevaluation if these services that you're receiving or these services that you're giving are working for you, if you feel aligned with them, with Venus being your ruler. So that is what I have for you, Libra. I hope you have a wonderful month, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Scorpio, welcome to March 2025. So Scorpio, we have a lot of collected focus on 3 signs of the zodiac. And I want to start with Aries for you because this is your 6th house. So matters pertaining to your working life, your working environment, your routines, your co-workers, your colleagues, your employees. All of these are highlighted, but so is your health and your well-being, you know, your physical body, how you're taking care of yourself. So we have a Venus retrograde here from the 1st to the 27th, but then Venus retrogrades into your 5th house. We have a Mercury retrograde here from the 15th to the 29th. The 29th Mercury retrogrades also into your 5th house. And we have a solar eclipse in your 6th house on the 29th, and then Neptune enters your 6th house on the 30th, which is fascinating for all of us because none of us have experienced this in our lifetimes before. So here's the deal. You're probably reevaluating your health. So what you do for your health, whether that be going to the gym, going to Pilates, going to yoga, your diet, whether you're vegetarian, vegan, carnivore, whatever the case is, you're reevaluating these different things and how they're working for you health-wise. You may also be reevaluating your relationships to people who fall in this sector. So your doctor, your personal trainer, your nutritionist. You may also be reevaluating your relationship to your colleagues, to the people you work with, your employees. There can be some miscommunication with these people. So if you're going to a gym appointment, for example, or a doctor's appointment, double check the times because there might be miscommunication. Get it clear, get it in writing, and be prepared that there may be some frustrations with appointments pertaining to health or people pertaining to health in your life, you know, miscommunications, frustrations, that type of thing. With Mercury retrograde, it's rarely as bad as it seems. So it might just be that you have to, you know, double check something or ask again. As frustrating as it can be, you're really reevaluating these parts of your life because you're heading to a new chapter. That solar eclipse in Aries on the 29th is a new chapter for you work-wise, so your job. Some of you might be starting a new job in March after a period of reevaluating and thinking, do you know what, this isn't for me. I'm going to put the wheels in motion to find something more suited in terms of my role, in terms of my responsibilities. Some of you may be thinking, okay, I've been doing this type of workout, gym routine, health regimen for so long, I'm no longer seeing results. So what do I need to try now? Like, what do I need to maybe start again, try again? What's going wrong? You're really reevaluating your health and your well-being. Maybe you've had a few back and forth runs at, you know, quitting something health-wise that's not good for you in your, you know, experience, because that can be relative to everybody. But say it's smoking, say it's sugar, you're back and forth trying to quit something. You might find that solar eclipse on the 29th is the time when you really focus on doing it. I want to say something a bit out there. I feel like a lot of Scorpio risings in particular, if you're looking to quit something, you might be looking down the route of hypnosis, or something that's a little bit on the spiritual side, because Neptune is entering your health sector on the 30th. So when it comes to your routines and your well-being, with Neptune, there can be a hypnosis style energy to it. So some of you may be trying that to work through something health wise. Some of you may also be trying to, bring a more spiritual energy into your practice. So, say you're training with a personal trainer, you might bring in breath work. Some of you might be bringing in more meditation. Some of you may be listening to subliminals overnight for health results or something like that, going into a spiritual route or just incorporating it in. I'm not telling you to give up one thing or the other. I'm not giving you any health advice whatsoever, but you may be bringing in a more spiritual component to your routine. Also, in terms of your role in your job, you may be sort of going more with the flow with Neptune in this sector. Some of you may have over the next, this is 14 years, but it can bring up colleagues, employees who are maybe a bit deceptive or escapist or a bit avoidant, but it can also bring up people in your work sector who teach you a lot of compassion and forgiveness and unconditional love, and you transcend issues with health or issues with work or the people that you work with. With that solar eclipse being in your 6th house, Scorpio, a lot of you could be starting a new role or a new job where you get to travel, or where you get to study, or where you get an education, or something that helps change your belief systems, or you really bring your beliefs and your principles into what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, as it's ruled by Mars in your 9th house. So as you can see, there's a lot of reevaluation and clearing out with the 6th house, figuring out what works for you health-wise, what doesn't, who works for you health-wise and who doesn't, but also just in terms of your job, what is and is not working. I found the last Venus retrograde was in my 6th house. I found that it can be particularly busy in terms of your work, and you can find other people a bit unreliable, or working relationships can be a bit strained. But you can also find with Venus women in the workplace who are actually very helpful, women who can really come to your aid, because Venus is a benefic after all. Some of you might reconnect with folk that you used to work with and, have more social experiences with them, and a bit of a reconnection to old colleagues, employees, and that type of thing, particularly women with Venus. And it can be pleasant. Venus is not an unpleasant planet. It can bring a bit of discord in your relationships when it's retrograde, but it can also bring reconnection, which can be lovely. But just know that Mercury retrograde in that sector from the 15th to the 29th may bring a bit of miscommunication in your day-to-day routines. Now we're going to talk about the 5th house. So the Sun is in your 5th house from the 20th until the 20th, and Venus retrogrades back into your 5th house on the 27th, and Mercury retrogrades back into your 5th house on the 29th. When it comes to love life, dating, you may reconnect. And by reconnect, I just want to say the reconnection thing is a spectrum. That can be hearing from somebody, seeing someone across the street. That can be just catching up. That can be reconnecting, as in getting back together. It can be a complete spectrum when it comes to your dating life. So maybe hearing from someone who was a fling, someone who was a romantic prospect, someone who you dated before. You could reconnect with them in some capacity. That might simply be them messaging you and you saying, "Not today, Satan," and you don't reply. Or it can be you dated someone years ago, you forgot they existed, they come back up again, and you give it another shot. Now I'm going to tell you why this is actually a reconnection to the past in some way, but it is leading to your future. So this is not necessarily about love either. There's other ways this can play out. But for those of you that do reconnect with someone from the past, or there's some form of reconnection to an old romantic prospect, this is leading you in new directions. And now the new directions are varied for your own personal journey, but it might be that it wasn't the right time and it's the right time now. It might be that it comes back up so that you can heal from it and go in a new direction love-wise. It can be that it inspires something creatively in you that helps you go down a more creative path. For a lot of you that are creatives, and I know a lot of you are, this can be a time when you're maybe thinking, I had a song I was writing that was actually pretty good, and I didn't really put it out back then, but I think I might look at it again and revamp it. When people remaster songs from years ago or remix songs from years ago, that can be what this Venus retrograde is for you if you're creative or in any creative pursuit, bringing up something that didn't get its flowers before, changing it ever so slightly and it working this time, it being a part of your new path creatively. For some of you, it can be to do with children that you have. So when I say children, you know, they can be small children or your adult children, but there can be miscommunication and frustrations with your kids with Venus and Mercury retrograde in that sector, particularly, as I say, in the last three or 4 days of the month. You could be finding them to be a bit frustrating, or there can be tension in the relationship. There can be miscommunication as well if you're dating someone with someone that you're dating plans, romantic plans. But I see this for a lot of you going over old works of art that you had, or listening to songs you used to love, you know, reconnecting with art that you used to enjoy, movies you used to watch. It's quite nostalgic from an artistic perspective. When it comes to your children, if you're buying things for your children, don't go crazy, because you're going to want to take it back in a month. You're going to want to take it back in a month. So if you're buying things for your kids, for your babies, if you're feeling extravagant, don't. Or do. You can do what you want. I'm just advising you, you're probably going to change your mind a month from now, so just be mindful of that. Because Venus retrograde in the sector, spending money on your children might be something that you just don't really enjoy. You just wish you hadn't done a month from now. And I don't mean that as in not spending any money, but you know, if it's something extravagant or out there a bit different, you might look back and think, I don't know why I did that. It can also be with the fifth house, you know, a time when you're just reflecting on what brings you joy, what brings you fun, how to reconnect with your heart, what makes you happy, what makes you sing. And there may be some things from the past that you'd really like to bring back into your life, Scorpio. Now I want to talk about the total lunar eclipse in Virgo on the 14th. This is happening in your friendship sector. So from January, the South Node has been here, and it brings a sense of karmic collection to your friendships. So for some of you, where there has been a bit of a how do I put this? Some of you might find that certain friendships in your life are coming to an end because it is just simply time. For whatever circumstances are going on in your life, it'll be different for everybody. But I think for a lot of you, in terms of, you know, your daily routines, you may be ending friendships you don't have time for, or ending friendships with people you used to work with, or you know, work with now, because it's just time. You know, with a total lunar eclipse, you may be clearing out your friendship circle. Friendships may be leaving your life in many different ways. You know, there's many ways a person can leave your life, or it may just be ending a particular chapter in a friendship. For some of you, this can also be that you're letting go of an old goal or aspiration for the future that you used to have, maybe from a work perspective, in terms of what you thought you'd be doing on a day-to-day basis. It no longer aligns with your current life, and your day-to-day schedule for the future is going to change. With the total lunar eclipse in the 11th, ruled by Mercury in the 6th, you may also be finding that, you know, when it comes to your friendships, social connections, teams, there can be people leaving your groups, your teams, where you work, and there can be a lot of significant shifts when it comes to who you're working with on a day-to-day basis. But with this total lunar eclipse in the 11th house, you're really reevaluating your friendships. Some of you might be figuring out if, you know, you're going to keep a friendship with a Virgo sun, moon, or rising with this total lunar eclipse. There can be significant shifts in your social circle. At this time, Scorpio, you know, as I say, friendships can be ending, they can be leaving your life. This might be because they have to move. This might be because the friendship's not working. This might be many different things, but there can be changes in your social circle. Can also be a time, though, as this is ruled by Mercury retrograde and the South Node is in Virgo, you reconnect with old friends that you used to have. You get together with people that you used to work with, a team that you used to work with. You return to a team you used to work with around the 14th. You're reconnecting with your old pals that you maybe know from your job, you maybe know from the gym, you maybe know from the doctor's office. I don't know. Reconnecting with people that you've known before and sort of having a reunion this month can be something that comes up for you as well. Especially with, you know, Venus and Mercury retrograde in the 6th, you could definitely be reconnecting with old colleagues this month, Scorpio. But that is what I have for you. I hope you have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Sagittarius, welcome to March. So Sagittarius, I want to begin with the total lunar eclipse in Virgo for you because this is happening in a mutable sign, so you're feeling very impacted by this. It's happening in an angular house, your 10th house. So this is happening on the 14th of March. The effects of an eclipse are not necessarily so obvious right away. They can take up to 6 months to manifest, but the South Node has been in this sign since January. And this is putting the focus for you, Sagittarius, on your career. Now, you may be finding that there is some significant change happening when it comes to your career, when it comes to a long-term goal, when it comes to your public image or your reputation, what you're known for, essentially. With a total lunar eclipse, it can be that some of you are leaving a job. Some of you could be leaving one particular industry altogether as well. There could be a significant professional shift for you. Maybe you're retiring, maybe you're leaving a particular workplace, maybe your boss is leaving, maybe there are significant shifts or changes within your company. Sagittarius. And because this lunar eclipse is ruled by Mercury in your 5th house, you may be having changes in your career because of your children. So maybe some of you are pregnant, some of you are giving birth around this time, maybe some of you are starting a family. But if it's not to do with children, it can also be that perhaps for some of you, it can also be that you're becoming a grandparent or something of that nature too. It can be that for some of you, you're making changes professionally based on what is true to your heart. You know, what makes you happy, what gives you joy, what feels fun to you, what feels creative. And by creative, I mean it doesn't have to be, you know, an artistic endeavor, but it can be what makes you feel like you're bringing new energy in, letting go of old energy. You feel like there's constantly change, you feel like there's evolvement, and you're really looking at your career through that lens. So what is going to feel right to you on a heart space level? So there can absolutely be changes for you, Sagittarius, when it comes to your public image, your career, your social status, and you may be making changes because I think some of you truly are more focused with, you know, the North Node in your 4th house, Saturn in your 4th house. You have responsibilities at home, to family. Some of you could be more focused on moving homes, expanding your family. Some of you could be more focused on your responsibilities as a parent, and maybe that's bringing you out of your career. Maybe some of you are on maternity or something like that around this time. That can be a shift in perspective for you, Sagittarius. But when it comes to family, this is also an area that you're reevaluating. Okay, so Venus is going to go retrograde in your 5th house in the 1st, but it retrogrades back into your 4th house in the 27th. In a similar fashion, Mercury goes retrograde in your 5th house in the 15th and retrogrades back into your 4th house on the 29th. So from the 27th onwards, there really is this core reflection and reevaluation when it comes to your home, when it comes to your family. Now, for a lot of you, I will say, if you're looking to redecorate, if you're looking to renovate, if you could just put it on pause for that time period, you know, from the 27th of March to the 12th of April, if you could, because you may find yourself buying things or making aesthetic changes that you look back on and think, I'm not so sure why I did that. A lot of the time when there's a Venus retrograde in the 4th, you can pick things that really don't match the aesthetic of your home, or that you don't like the same way when Venus goes direct, or that, you know, then end up taking up space and clutter in your home and you sort of wonder why you bought them. They can just be off, is the only way that I can describe it. So you might find that it's a better time to not buy anything new for the home, especially if it's expensive, because you might change your mind. And if you're looking to buy new gadgets, Mercury retrograde in that sector, not great either, because you might find that it doesn't work, or it's complicated, or it just doesn't work the same. I know of someone who bought a microwave when Mercury was going retrograde in their 4th, and I had said, I don't think this is a good idea, but they did nonetheless, and it doesn't work. It still doesn't work for them with Mercury. And Mercury's gone through many signs since, but it still is a temperamental, fidgety thing that they just can't fix. And Mercury can be with our gadgets, so just be mindful of that. Just, you know, if you need to repair something, by all means, do that. But if you want to buy something brand spanking new for the home, not advised. I'm just going to be honest with you, Sagittarius. So This can also be to do with your home and family relationships, your relationship to your parents, your relationship to your kids. You may find, especially with the mother, there could be miscommunication, there could be misunderstandings, relationships could feel a little bit strained at times with the home and the family. This can also be a time where your children really come into the spotlight for you in your life. So Venus going retrograde in your sector of children in the 1st, and Mercury retrograde there in the 15th. Misunderstandings with your kids, misunderstandings, misinterpretations surrounding plans that your children have. There can be disagreements with children. And this doesn't have to be, you know, if you have small kids, this can be to do with your adult children, disagreements with them as well. It can also be that if you know, with Venus being retrograde in the 5th house, the 5th house is also love and romance. You may run into someone you used to date. You may reconnect with an old love interest. And I want to state very clearly, Sagittarius, that reconnect wear it as a loose garment, because it will vary on the spectrum for different people. One person may see an ex or an old fling at an event and not speak to them. One person may run into them, have a catch up, and then let them go. One person may hear from someone that they want to give it another shot because maybe it wasn't the right time. And with the North Node in Pisces in your 4th house, maybe this is someone that you could see yourself having a family with. It doesn't have to be, but it just feels like for a lot of you it can be very different in terms of its manifestation with Venus retrograde in your 5th and Mercury retrograde in your 5th. There can absolutely be varying degrees of hearing from or hearing of or seeing an old romantic interest. Whether it works this time around or whether it is even a significant connection this time around is up for debate. You would need other transits to support that. Now, for some of you, it can also be just in your love life in general with people that you're dating now. There could be misunderstandings about plans, about events, about expectations. So just bear that in mind this month. There can be challenges with communication. For a lot of you, if you're creatives, if you have a creative project or something that you really love to do, you may have something that you shelved a while ago that you could give a second life to. So something you were working on, say it was a poem, say it was a YouTube video, say it was a garment that you were creating or knitting or something like that, you may find that if you bring it back out, you can give it second life. You know, you can redo it, you can work it better this time around if you pick it up again. You know, retrogrades are about review, renew, redo, that kind of thing. Sagittarius, there's a solar eclipse coming up in your 5th house on the 29th, and I really want to emphasize this because the 5th house is so highlighted for you, okay? We do have this retrograde energy, we're reviewing, we're reflecting, but we also have this new moon, which is a solar eclipse coming up on the 29th in your 5th house. So there can be a new beginning in this area. Now, this new beginning is one that may be because of reflection and reevaluation. So you've been reflecting on your love life, maybe you've been reflecting on creative projects, or maybe you're reflecting on your parenting style. This can be a new beginning in that chapter. For some of you, it can be a pregnancy as well. It is ruled by Mars in the 8th, so this can be a significant transformation. This can be, for some of you, a new love in your life that really transforms you from the inside out, really brings a lot of change to your life with Mars in the 8th. It can be this can be someone you're very attracted to. It can also be for some of you, if it's not that, you have a new creative idea, a new hobby, something that brings you a lot of fun. It's ruled by Mars. Mars is in your 8th house. It could be something that helps you heal and helps you transform through, you know, it's like art therapy or something of that nature. Sagittarius helps you heal, helps you transform from the inside out. This can also be for some of you, as I say, a new chapter in the life of a child in your life. If you have kids, this can be a new chapter for them, something new, significant happening in their life, or even reconnection to a child. What's interesting about this eclipse, Sagittarius, Neptune actually enters Aries the day after. None of us have dealt with this in this lifetime. So Neptune is going to be entering your 5th house. This brings an energy of transcendence, of compassion, of forgiveness on the positive. It can also bring in the negative: deception, deceit, rose-tinted glasses, delusion. Bear in mind, this is a 14-year transit, so this does not all have to happen at once. If it's not hitting your chart, it might not feel like it's happening at all. But because it's so close to an eclipse, it's really, for me, kind of coloring the essence of the eclipse for you. If you fall in love, you might fall in love really hard. If there's a new start with a child in your life, there may be this sense of unconditional love you've not had before. So say, for example, it's your first time having a child, you may feel this range of emotions and love you've not experienced with Neptune. It can also be for some of you, if you're beginning something creative, you may feel like it's channeled. You know, you might feel like it is something you're channeling. I always think back to Kurt Cobain in Nirvana, because he's the one person that always comes to my mind when I think of channeling. He was that very Piscean, Neptunian energy. But Neptune was going through his fifth house whenever he was writing his biggest hits and creating his biggest hits. So for some of you, if you're, you know, an artist of any kind, this can be a wonderful 14-year period for you in terms of creativeness. So that's just something to bear in mind. It can be a very creative, magical time for you. And it can also be, you know, when it comes to the things that you do for fun, they may have a more spiritual component, or you may have more fun, you know, helping others, serving others with Neptune going through your fifth house. This could be something that brings you a lot of joy. It can also be a time when you're really focused with this solar eclipse on healing your inner child, healing your relationship to your inner child, and maybe living a more artistic, childlike chapter over the next 6 months, Sagittarius. That's what I have for you. Talk to you soon. Hi Capricorn, welcome to March 2025. So Capricorn, I'm going to begin for you with the heavy presence of planets in your fourth house. So March is very focused on your living situation, your living arrangements. It's also very focused on your family, your home, and your roots. So this area has significant prominence in the month of March. There's a Venus retrograde in this sector. Venus will be retrograde in your fourth house from the 1st to the 27th. Venus in the 27th will re-enter your third house. Mercury will enter your fourth house in the 3rd, go retrograde in the 15th, and then re-enter your third house on the 29th. There's a solar eclipse in Aries on the 29th in your fourth house, and Neptune enters that sector on the 30th, which is uncharted territory for us all. So let's talk about it. Venus retrograde in your home and family sector. There can be discord at times, especially when Mercury comes in as well on the 15th. There can be discord when it comes to family. So misunderstandings, miscommunication, a bit of tension in the air, a bit of a disruption when it comes to your family relationships. There can sometimes be, you know, certain actions or things said that maybe rub you up the wrong way. They can be misinterpreted, but sometimes it can also just be that people aren't acting as gracious and charming when Venus is retrograde. So you might find at this time that feathers get ruffled within your family or within the home. I would also strongly suggest that if you're looking to redecorate, this is not the time, because Venus retrograde essentially skews our perceptions and our tastes when it comes to what looks good, what matches, what works. And when Venus is retrograde in the fourth house, trust me on this one, when you buy things for your home, because you will want to, they may be something that you look at a month from now when Venus is direct and think, what was I thinking? This does not match the color scheme. This does not match the aesthetic. This isn't even that nice. You know, and you can end up having things that you want to return. So if you are experimenting and buying things, make sure you keep the labels, but I would sort of suggest holding off buying anything for the home, especially if it's expensive. And this is particularly as well with Mercury, gadgets, you know, things that require electricity, batteries, things like that in the home. This is not the time to invest in something brand new. This is more a time of repair. So upscaling something. If you have a piece of furniture that's looking a bit tired, you know, giving it a varnish or repainting it or something of that nature works better. Getting something fixed also works better when it comes to the home. All right, Capricorn, so just bear that in mind. We have a solar eclipse in your home sector on the 29th, so there could be a significant change in your family life. This could usher in a new chapter for you. I think for a lot of you, you could, Capricorn, be looking into buying a home, renting a home with a partner. Some of you could also be perhaps joining forces with someone and buying a property together, maybe as a business relationship. Some of you may also be, if you live with a partner or a spouse already, you could have plans together to transform or change your family life or your home life in some capacity. With Neptune entering your fourth house on the 30th, a day after the eclipse, bear in mind this is a 14-year transit. But some of you may be deciding that when it comes to your home, you want it to have a little bit more of a spiritual essence. So that can be reflected in your decor. That can be making a meditation room, a spiritual room, a yoga room. That can be bringing in more Neptunian colors. That can be about cleansing the energy, feng shui, that type of thing with Neptune entering that sector. So when it comes to your home and your family, you may also be finding that if you're purchasing a property, I would bet a lot of you probably want to go toward the sea. You know, you maybe want to live beside the ocean or beside a river or something of that nature with Neptune entering that sector. The reason that it's likely to be with a partner is because Mars is in the 7th house, so that can be to do with partnerships and relationships. So you and a partner may be getting a home together, you may be partnering with someone to buy a property, to renovate a property, or something of that nature, Capricorn. Or there can be a new chapter in your home and living situation with a spouse, or a new chapter with your spouse or your partner's family. We have a total lunar eclipse in Virgo on the 14th, and for you Capricorn, this is your 9th house. Some of you may be traveling around the time of this eclipse, but I also think for some of you, you could be looking at a property abroad or a property that is, you know, maybe a holiday home or a vacation home. There could be a change when it comes up to that property. I think for a lot of you as well with this eclipse here, you may be wrapping up a period of education. You may be getting a degree, a diploma. Some of you may also be having a significant spiritual shift in terms of your beliefs. Some of you may be moving away from the religion that your family follows or that you were brought up with as well with that total lunar eclipse. Virgo. Capricorn. Sorry. I just read the word Virgo in my notes, and for a second I was in another dimension. There's also a lot of activity happening in your 3rd house. The sun is there until the 20th. We have Venus retrograde re-entering your 3rd house on the 27th, Mercury re-entering that sector on the 29th. So for a lot of you Capricorn, there's a focus on your communication. Just know in the last few days of the month, communication could be an issue. You might not be saying things quite the way you intended to say them. They could come out wrong. They could ruffle a few feathers. There could be some issues with a sibling. There could be the reconnection with a sibling, seeing a sibling you've not seen in a long time. There could also be perhaps that you are having trouble with your neighbours at this time, or old disputes with neighbours are coming back up again. It can be too that if you're taking a short trip, there could be miscommunication or delays in terms of your travel plans, Capricorn. But that is what I have for you, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Aquarius, welcome to March. I hope you're all doing really well. So Aquarius, I'm going to talk firstly about your money, your income, but also your values, what makes you, what is your priority at the moment? Where are you getting your self-confidence? Where are you getting your self-esteem? This sector is actually under reevaluation this month. So Venus is retrograde all of March. Venus goes retrograde on the 1st, albeit Venus goes retrograde in your 3rd house. Mercury also goes retrograde in your 3rd house, but both will re-enter on the 27th and the 29th of the month your sector of finances. A lot of you, I would say at this time to really curb your spending. Don't be spending impulsively. Don't be spending unwisely. Really rein it in and just reevaluate it for a second, what you're spending your money on, the money that you're making, your sources of income. It's a good time to go through your bank statements. It's a good time to check if you have any subscriptions you don't want to be subscribed to anymore. iPhones are pretty tricky for that. It's a good way of figuring out if you still are subscribed to things, apps, that type of thing that you don't want to be anymore, if you're still paying for things you're not using. Really going through your finances and seeing where your money is going, what you're spending it on, and what you are prioritizing in terms of spending as well. So just reevaluation with Venus retrograde, your finances, but also, reevaluating your self-confidence, your self-worth, your relationship to confidence, how confident you feel, how you're showing up to the world with a sense of confidence or not, and maybe doing some inner work and inner healing in that sector. Some of you may also be finding, with it being the 2nd house, it's time to reconsider what you have in terms of possessions. Maybe you're wanting to donate some things. Venus retrograde in Pisces, it's very compassionate. You might be wanting to help other people by giving to those less fortunate than you. Maybe there are things in your house that you want to declutter, but you feel you could spare to someone who would benefit from it. rather than throwing it out, for example. But you're really reevaluating what you have. Some of you could be going through a clear out, a declutter. Some of you could be letting go of possessions that maybe once had a sentimental value but now hold a certain kind of energy that you don't want anymore. So gifts from an ex, presents from an old friend that you're no longer connected with, things in your home that hold an energy, hold a vibration, hold a frequency that doesn't match with you anymore. That might be something that you're doing, Aquarius. Now, we also have, as I said, this Venus retrograde, this Mercury retrograde, they begin in your third. So this can put a bit of tricky energy onto communication. Communication can absolutely, for you more than anyone, Aquarius, go awry this month. There can be miscommunications. You can say something, mean another. Someone can do that to you. You can get your plans mixed up. Some of you may, with Mercury retrograde in the third, from the 15th to the 29th, you could experience car trouble, commute issues. Your bus gets cancelled, your flight gets cancelled or gets postponed or delayed or something of that nature. You could find that your travel plans are miscommunicated. You get to the airport, you've forgotten a passport, that type of thing. But it's a good time to have, your car checked. It's a good time to have, if you need repairs done. Not the best time to buy a new car, Aquarius, but it's a good time to get repairs done, fixes done, on cars, on phones, on laptops, on gadgets. As I say, it's not the best time to buy something new. But we are headed as well towards new directions in that area for you, Aquarius, because there's a solar eclipse in your third house on the 29th. And this is particularly interesting because although we have these retrogrades in that sector in the first part of the month, you're going through this reevaluation and this reassessment when it comes to third house matters. So your thinking may change this month. It can also be to do with the way that you communicate, the information that you're taking in. It can also be to do with your relationship with your siblings, Aquarius, or your neighbours. And as I say, cars, gadgets, that type of thing. There can be a new beginning in this area from the 29th, but it can take up to 6 months for you to be clear on what it is. It's ruled by Mars in your 6th house. So when it comes to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, you may be making some significant changes. Some of you might be noticing that certain workouts, certain exercise is good for your mental health, and you may be committing to a new way of thinking, whereby exercise or routines really help or influence how you're doing mindset-wise. So you could also be beginning a new commute, a new journey, taking a trip. Some of you could have a trip coming up with work. You could be relocating for work. You could be traveling for work. You could be connecting with new people who really share your mindset through your job, is another way that this could come up for you, Aquarius. Neptune is also entering that sector on the 30th, and this is uncharted territory for all of us, Neptune and Aries. It can take up to 14 years, a Neptune transit, so it doesn't bring about necessarily immediate changes. But what I will say is, with its proximity to that eclipse, I think for a lot of you, if there's a new beginning with a sibling, a neighbor, a car, communication, whatever the case is, Neptune being there can have an effect where you really want to help other people. Maybe you want to help other people with communication. Maybe you want to put out inspiring information online. You want to coach people. You want to help them with their mindset, help them with their ways of thinking, with communication. Some of you might want to start a podcast. With Neptune there, it could be about healing, it could be about helping, it could be about compassion, it could be about spiritual matters. It can also just simply be about influencing people. Neptune's a very influential energy, so maybe you're wanting to go down a social media route or start something online, Aquarius. Some of you could also be beginning a new chapter with a sibling where you maybe have to forgive one another, you have to heal from something from the past. That can be another way that this comes up. Some of you could also, this is very obscure and probably won't be for everybody, but you could be beginning a new chapter work-wise that requires you to travel by boat. That could be for some of you as well. But all in all, this new beginning, this new chapter, Aquarius, is with siblings, it is with neighbors, it is with information. The way that you're thinking is changing, and it's going to impact the way that you show up at your job, the way you show up for your health as well. That is what I have for you, Aquarius, but I forgot the total lunar eclipse in Virgo, so I'm not actually going to stop just yet. This total lunar eclipse on the 14th, it is the first eclipse in Virgo we've had since 2016. This is happening in your 8th house, and it's a total lunar eclipse, so it's quite significant, it's quite prominent. It's ruled by Mercury in your 3rd house, okay? So with this total lunar eclipse, there can be a process of letting go for you. Some of you may be, I feel like it's very mindset oriented for you, but some of you may be working through transforming your mindset, working through emotional baggage, past experiences, past traumas, in order to get a different mindset, to change your mindset. For some of you, it could be something like EMDR, where you're literally rewiring your brain with a therapist. For some of you, it could also be that perhaps you are really getting organized when it comes to your shared finances. So that can be inheritances, your partner's money, loans, assets, joint ventures, property matters. There can be a change in your mortgage. There can be a change in your joint financial affairs. And with Mercury being in the 3rd, maybe you're getting a letter about it around this time. Maybe you're getting a note, an email, and this is something you may be a bit back and forth on with Mercury retrograde through that sector. It can be very busy for your phone, for your emails. Emails can get missed, phone calls can be missed, voicemails can be missed. So you might find that there's miscommunication and having to go back and forth, or missing an email here and there, missing an appointment, and give yourself some grace. It happens. Life gets very busy. We have a lot of gadgets, we have a lot of technology. It's easy to miss stuff, especially in a Mercury retrograde. And Mercury retrograde is a good time to remember that we're human, we are not machines. So if that total lunar eclipse triggers something with you where you feel like, oh, I never get this right, I always miss this email, I always forget to do this, or, da 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 da, be a bit easier on yourself, okay? Just chill. There can also be changes in your partner's money, your partner's finances, but I do think a lot of you could be having, communication about that around the time of this lunar eclipse. But a lot of you could be working on something from a psychological standpoint that really helps you with your mindset as well, Aquarius. But that is what I have for you, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Pisces, welcome to March 2025. Pisces, for you, it might just change your life. So let's talk about it. Venus and Mercury are both going retrograde in your 2nd house of money, income, material possessions, values, but they're both retrograding back into your 1st house of the self. Okay, so there is a focus on you. Venus retrogrades back into your sign on the 27th, Mercury on the 29th. So with these planets in retrograde, you may be reevaluating yourself, okay? Neptune, your modern ruler, is also entering Aries. It's leaving your sign, and we've not had a significant shift with Neptune changing signs in 14 years. That's how long a Neptune transit is, roughly. So your perspective of yourself, you might be having a little bit of an identity crisis to a certain extent, really reevaluating your style, who you are, who you're becoming with the North Node in your sign, with Saturn in your sign, Neptune. There's a lot of focus on you, what you want, your personal goals, your style, your image, your aesthetic. These things could really be taking, center stage in your life in March. And you may be reevaluating what you wear, how you style yourself. With retrogrades, sometimes we return to old styles, things that used to really suit us, that we were trying different things and we forgot about it. You could return to your natural hair color, for example. You might find yourself returning to an old makeup look. You could find yourself really reevaluating what suits you and what doesn't. I don't recommend, whenever there's a Venus retrograde in the 1st house, I don't recommend making any permanent or expensive changes to your appearance or your style, because Venus retrograde can skew our perception of what looks good and what we like. That's why it's not advised. It's not saying that something's going to go drastically wrong. It's more so that you will change your mind. So please don't do anything permanent. You can, of course, buy things that are within your color scheme, or, repurchase the lipstick that you always wear, or whatever it is. But I wouldn't be trying anything drastically new or expensive or permanent this month. Interestingly enough, I do feel like a lot of you may embrace a more natural look or go back to things that suited you before. Pisces, with this retrograde, you might also be going through your wardrobe and clearing out some space, some things that don't suit anymore, that don't work for you, to make space for new things this year that are really in alignment with your style. You've Saturn and Neptune both in your sign for most of the month. As I say, Neptune does change, but Saturn's very structured, it's very tailored, it's very corporate, it's very mature, Neptune's very floaty and bohemian and spiritual, so you could find yourself sort of oscillating between the two with these planets in your sign, and you're really trying to figure out what fits you on a day-to-day basis, what works for you on a day-to-day basis. But yes, I wouldn't be investing a lot of money into aesthetics this month or making any significant changes. Now, the second house is also pretty emphasized this month. Venus goes retrograde in your second house on the 1st, Mercury on the 15th, and you may be reflecting and reevaluating your finances, going through your bank statements, what you spend money on, what your priorities are financially, really streamlining it down, maybe being a bit more careful. Not a good month to buy anything very expensive. Your priorities financially are shifting quite a bit, especially with these retrogrades. So you can also have money, that is owed to you from someone else with Mercury returned to you. So you could get money that you're owed from somebody else, or refunded for something as well, repaid for something as well. An old financial opportunity could come back. Maybe a way that you used to make money comes back around again. We are leading up to a solar eclipse in that sector on the 29th, so there's new ways of making money for you this year, Pisces. New doorways are opening up. They don't have to occur right smack bang around the eclipse. It can be a month from now, it can be 6 months from now. But there can be new beginnings when it comes to your financial life, so new ways of making money. For a lot of you, it's ruled, because this eclipse is ruled by Mars in your 5th house, I think a lot of you could be making money through something creative, or something you're very passionate about, or something that's a lot of fun for you, something that you get a lot of enjoyment from. And I do feel with Neptune going into your financial sector the day after this eclipse, you could find that you're making money through spiritual endeavors, through healing, through your natural talents, your natural gifts, your natural abilities, and your Piscean qualities. So being artistic, being dreamy, being empathic, that kind of thing, Pisces. With Neptune entering your financial sector on the 30th, you're transcending money issues. Over the next 14 years, you may become a little less interested in money for money's sake. You might be more interested in helping others, not just financially, but through your talents, through your gifts. Your values will change. You're more aligned with your spiritual side. You're more compassionate. Those are where your values are with Neptune going through the 2nd house. And it can just bring about a more spiritual connection to your finances, but also your self-confidence, really transcending human insecurity at times over the next 14 years. So that's the emphasis on your 2nd and your 1st house, Pisces. Real evaluation here, your finances, your ways of making money. Definitely could be a new opportunity coming in. I think for a lot of you, if you're making money, it's through fun. It could also be your finances are changing because of romance with the 5th house as well. Or your confidence could be changing because of your romantic life. Some of you could be beginning a new chapter financially where you get to really express yourself, or you get to do something creative more generally. But I'm also going to say we do have a total lunar eclipse in your sector of relationships. We've not had an eclipse in your relationship sector since 2016. If you think back, if you have an idea over what was occurring in your relationships around that time. With this total lunar eclipse, it could be possible that there's a significant shift for many of you when it comes to your relationships. Now, this is 23 degrees of Virgo, so if you have anything from 20 to 25 degrees of Virgo, you're most impacted. This can be your marriage, this can be a business partnership, this can be a significant connection in your life that shifts. Your connections are shifting through the lens of value. So what matters, what your priorities are, how confident you feel about these connections, what your values are, what matters most to you, and maybe also finances could be a factor in any relationship shifts as well, Pisces. For those of you that are in significant relationships that have not been working for a while, maybe your values have changed, it could be a point of ending for some of you. But for a lot of you, it can just be that something's maybe changing in your partner or your spouse's life that is impacting your finances. For example, you could become the breadwinner. It could also be a case that you're just ending a particular chapter in your relationship life, a way of doing things. Your priorities are shifting in terms of the relationships that you choose or the relationships that you're in. And I think for a lot of you, if you're single, this could be a time where someone returns from the past. Now, when I say return, because it's Venus retrograde, reconnecting and returning, it is a spectrum. You know, it's running into somebody that you used to be in a relationship with, having a catch up and then going your separate ways, or it's hearing about them, or it's hearing from them, or it can be reuniting with them in a union. It's a varying spectrum. But whatever the case may be, Pisces, if there's someone returns from the past, and it can also be a past life with the South Node in the 7th house, you're really looking at this relationship and reevaluating it from the perspective of, how does it affect my confidence? Or are we aligned in our values? Or, you know, what's the financial status of this relationship? Those things affect your thinking about whether to partner up with someone or whether to leave someone or not, with Mercury being in the 2nd. And because Mercury is about to go retrograde, it really emphasizes that sense of the past, reconnecting. Can be something that's happening for you around the time of this lunar eclipse. You might hear from an ex unexpectedly, run into them unexpectedly, or reconnect with someone from the past or a past life, as they say, unexpectedly this month, Pisces, with that total lunar eclipse. But it can be a significant shift in your partnerships, in your relationships, in your unions. It really puts the focus on what you want from relationships and how you feel about yourself in relationships. With the North Node in your sign, you're feeling more independent, you're feeling more self-assured, and you're really reevaluating who you are. And of course, then that naturally shifts the type of partnerships that you choose and the type of partnerships that you want to be in. And it may be a time for some of you where if someone comes back around, the timing or where you're at now actually matches and it actually works. So just bear that in mind. If someone does come back around, it's your decision to make, but you're really making it through the lens of, does this make me feel good or not? Pisces. That's what I have for you, and I'll talk to you soon.